I have great pleasure in welcoming Cecilia Malmström here, who is going to share with us her thoughts from the front line. Thank you, Cecilia.
This is the country that in the writings of Adam Smith invented the theory of free trade. And today trade is of course very much at the centre of the UK economy, along with investment. UK companies exported over £5 billion worth of goods and services outside the EU only last year. And those sales depend on markets being open to European exports. 5 million jobs, I mentioned, in this country depend on export. That is 1 in every 8 jobs. European value chains support Britain's integration in a global value chains, which supports jobs in Britain and across the European Union. The EU today has 52 agreements with countries from all over the world. Once they are all in force, about 40% of our exports will be covered by these free trade agreements. But we're not stopping there. So we have a broad geographical agenda for our free trade agreements, because countries are queuing up and they want to negotiate with us. And that is why, of course, with 500 million consumers, we are a very attractive market. We are the largest trading partner of 80 countries. We do benefit from open markets, but it is absolutely crystal clear that this will never be at the expense of our values or our European model. That is how we approach the question of public services, and the Commission has made unambiguous commitments on this. And they make clear that any government cannot be forced to privatize anything it doesn't want to because of trade or TTIP or any other agreement.
There is a substantial difference between being in a single market like the EU's and having a free trade agreement with the EU. A free trade agreement, however comprehensive, like the EU-Canada free trade agreement that was mentioned this morning, never guarantees the same type of access to a market than the single market model.
One of the things which worries me about the idea that somehow or other Britain, negotiating alone, will be able, through the sentiment of the special relationship with America, because we've been so hospitable to Chinese inward investment, we're going to get special treatment. You don't get special treatment in trade negotiations.
People's faith in free trade to trickle down benefits to ordinary people has been somewhat shaken post-crash. So from our perspective, what's in it for workers?
New Zealand was the first developed country in the world to negotiate a free trade agreement with China. People said, you're mad. How can you have a free trade agreement with China? They'll destroy you. They'll swamp you. They can make stuff so cheaply. I basically said, anything China can make more cheaply than us, we'll never get rich making. And what's been the result? Total number of jobs in New Zealand from 2007, before the China FTA was signed, job growth in New Zealand has continued to at least 10% more jobs in the New Zealand economy last year than there were, despite the global financial crisis, than there were prior to our signing the trade agreement with China.
The real experience on the jobs front has been at best mixed. It's not just about numbers of jobs, it's about quality of jobs. I would encourage you to come and speak to steel workers at the moment who really feel a sense of an absence of protection on this question of market economy status for China.
Yes, of course. Some industries will decline, some people will lose their jobs, and it's essential that that is managed, that those people are helped, that they're retrained, that there's assistance, particularly for the communities. And we haven't been all that very good at doing that in this country. But the sort of argument to say, because there is some threat to jobs, therefore we shouldn't liberalise, I just don't agree with Francis.
Labour market policy is not an EU competence. I mean, there are the occasional general framework things like the working type, but generally labour market policy is a national competence.
Do you think TTIP is bad enough from your perspective to make you actually want to advocate leaving the EU on the basis of TTIP?
The TUC has taken a very hard-headed assessment, and our conclusion is that if there was a Brexit, we would lose out on jobs, on investment, and critically on rights at work.
And for me, I can see no possibility of us achieving our export aspirations if we don't have at least the access to the markets we have presently with the EU and the future access, which current EU negotiations in progress do promise.
In trade policy, power matters. So in what kind of position you are matters a lot. New Zealand has a trade policy machinery that is 20, 30 years old, that date back probably to the 80s. It has been a very savvy trade negotiator. It has everything in place, basically, to run a trade policy. The UK would probably need some years.
True. I fear the transition. I think we would have a 5 or 10 year, possibly even 20-year period when we would be seriously disadvantaged. And of course, you have the many years it would take to actually negotiate those 50-odd trade agreements which the EU has and Britain doesn't have. And the idea that we would be front of any queue is idle.